Welcome back to Napoleon Hill, the 17 Universal Principles of Success. We will be discussing and uncovering in great depth Napoleon Hill's Lesson 11, entitled Controlled Attention. Having successfully applied these principles in their own lives, our distinguished guests will be sharing their own diverse stories, insights, and experiences as it relates to this powerful lesson. On this program, we have a power trio who really know and understand firsthand the power that comes with the lesson of controlled attention as outlined by Napoleon Hill. So before we enter this exciting session together, on the behalf of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, it's a great pleasure and honor of introducing our dynamic panel of guests, and they are Brian Tracy, Gary Ryan Blair, and John Gordon. Brian Tracy did not graduate from high school and worked at laboring jobs for several years until he finally got into straight commission sales. One day, he found a used copy of Think and Grow Rich, read it from cover to cover, and wrote down 10 goals that he dreamed of achieving. Within 1 month, his life had changed. His sales doubled and doubled again. His income increased dramatically. He became the sales manager for his company and began a lifelong journey in self-development. Today, Brian is chairman and CEO of Brian Tracy International. He is the author of 55 books that now have been translated into 42 languages. He's written and produced more than 300 audio and video learning programs, including the worldwide bestselling Psychology of Achievement. And Brian Tracy has consulted for more than 1,000 companies and addressed more than 5 million people in 5,000 talks and seminars in 61 countries worldwide. Joining Brian is Gary Ryan Blair. Gary is the president of the Goals Guy, a highly focused training organization whose mission is to help their clients build and sustain superior performance. Known as the Goals Guy and the #1 best-selling author of Everything Counts, Gary has spent over 20 years developing his expertise in all areas of peak performance. His skills and knowledge have led him to create a number of world-class resources like the 100-Day Challenge, which has been used over the years by more than 5 million people worldwide. And joining Brian and Gary is John Gordon. John Gordon's best-selling books and talks have inspired readers and audiences around the world. His principles have been put to test by organizations such as the NFL, NBA, college coaches and teams, Fortune 500 companies, school districts, hospitals, and nonprofits. He's the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Energy Bus, The No Complaining Rule, Training Camp, The Shark and the Goldfish, Soup, The Seed, and the latest, The Positive Dog. John and his tips have been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Fox and Friends, and in numerous magazines and newspapers. His clients include the Atlanta Falcons, Campbell Soup, Wells Fargo, State Farm, Bayer, and many more organizations. John observes, like many of our expert guests, that Napoleon Hill was light years ahead of his time. John remembers his mother giving him a copy of Think and Grow Rich when he graduated from college, and he remains forever grateful for Napoleon Hill's influence on the field of personal growth. So with that said, Brian, Gary, John, welcome to the Napoleon Hill lesson on controlled attention. It's a joy to have all of you here with us. Just getting right into the nuts and bolts of our program, based on your extensive experience and observation and expertise, how would you define or term the lesson of controlled attention? And perhaps we could start with you, Brian.
Thank you. I began teaching a program about 10 years ago called Focal Point. And Focal Point was based on the discovery that all successful people had developed the ability to focus single-mindedly on one thing and do only that thing until it was complete. So what I taught people over the years, I've written books on it, is the importance of overcoming procrastination and getting started on the most important task. And that's what Gary and John do. But you find that every successful person is a person who does what Napoleon Hill said and picks their major definite purpose. The one goal, and I say the one goal that if you achieved it would have the greatest impact on your life. And your ability to be absolutely crystal clear about that one goal and then to focus single-mindedly on it is the key to success, without which no success is possible. The other thing is that when you start focusing on a single goal, again, as Napoleon Hill says, and as we know from our own experiences, you start to accomplish vastly more, not only in that goal, but in every other part of your life.
Excellent. And Gary, would you like to add to what Brian
Well, I'm very familiar with Brian's focal point program, which is dead right on the money. And quite frankly, it actually inspired me, along with Dr. Hill's work, to really kind of come up with my own concept. The title of one of the books I have is actually called Focus. It's an acronym, but it's Follow One Course Until Successful. And it is directly tied back to this whole idea of controlled attention. Essentially, really what it's all about is, as an example, there's both a long and a short-term way of looking at this. I'm not a big fan or a believer in multitasking, such as we're on this phone call. There's no need for us to be dealing with email or signing checks or doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's for the next 60 minutes that we're together is to focus, to follow one course until successful, and stay fixated on whatever it is you can in order to get the best possible outcome in the shortest period of time. But that really is my perspective as it relates towards that.
It's a really great concept, Gary, focus. Because everything is focused. I have to tell you a great story. Bill Gates, president of Microsoft, and his father were having dinner with Warren Buffett recently. And there were several people around, and someone turned to them and said, in your estimation, gentlemen, what do you think is the key to success? All three simultaneously broke out and said, focus. Focus is the key. Is the most important single factor in success is focus. And I pass that on because it's a wonderful confirmation of what you teach, Gary. It's so important.
Taking that a little step further, think about this. I think this is a great metaphor. But when a horse runs a race, they put these things on a horse. We call them blinders. Essentially, the horse vernacular is called blinkers. But they prevent the horse from looking left or right, which really is east or west. What you want that horse to do for 1.25 miles is to run as fast as it can and have a one-dimensional point of view, is to cross that finish line and stay absolutely focused and fixated on that end line and crossing it quickly. And really, that's obviously the whole purpose of this conversation.
I think it's beautiful what you said, and the idea of focus is so important because if you look at this world we live in, distractions really are the enemy of greatness, and we have more distractions than ever today. So controlled attention, which Napoleon Hill talked about many years ago, is even more relevant to this day when you can get and control the possession of your mind and take possession of your mind and focus on what matters most. And I studied the best of the best. I wrote a book called Training Camp, and I interviewed all these people who were considered the best in their field of work. And every one of them had the ability to do what I call Zoom focus, which is the same thing as focal point and what you talk about with your focus concept, Gary. So it's really about Zoom focusing on what matters most day in and day out. If you look at baseball players, the difference between a 250 batter and 350 batter is not just 100 points, but millions of dollars, all-star appearances, fame, and fortune. You calculate 162 games a year, 4 or 5 bats a game. The difference is only 1.7 hits a week. That's it. 1.7 hits a week separates average and greatness. And I believe it's the ability to focus that causes you to have that difference.
Excellent. And so one of the questions, and Brian, you touched on it, that it's essential to have that first step, which is lesson one, a definite chief aim or a purpose or a goal. What prevents people from maintaining that focus in their lives? What are some of the obstructions?
Well, I think the biggest obstruction that leads to procrastination, and John said it, and it's becoming the biggest issue in our world today, if it wasn't always, is distraction. Is we are bombarded from all sides with all kinds of distractions, and by the end of the day, we've accomplished nothing but maybe dozens of little things. So one of the things I tell people is, first of all, let me just give you my approach. I'll be speaking to about 10,000 people tomorrow. I'm going to explain this to them in the 25 minutes that I have. I say, take a piece of paper and write down 10 goals that you'd like to achieve in the next year or so. Write them in the present tense, starting with the word I, as though the goals had already been achieved. And so you write down, I earn, I sell, I drive, I live in, and so on. And write down 10 goals. Then go back over the goals and imagine that you have a magic wand and that you could achieve all of these goals sooner or later, but you could achieve one goal within 24 hours. If you could achieve any goal in your life within 24 hours, which one goal would have the greatest positive impact on your life? And I do this exercise over and over again, and it's life-changing. If you can have it within 24 hours, because whichever answer you come up with, that's your major definite purpose. That's the goal that means the most to you. And then the second part is always to take action on the goal and say, what one step could you take immediately to achieve that goal? And I go through the process of writing out a list of steps and organizing the steps into a sequence and so on. But everybody knows the one step that they could take immediately. And then once we've done that, we say, all right, how are you going to measure the attainment of that goal? And one of the things that I have found is that in business and in life, everybody has a number. They even wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Number, referring to the amount you need before you retire. But in every business, there's one number that is more indicative or predictive of success in every goal. And what you have to do is fixate on that number, like a sniper, focusing their scope on that number. What is the number? For example, my son has just gotten into sales. I'm very happy about that. He says to me, well, this is just a law of averages. The key to his income is the number of doors he knocks on. He's cold calling. It's a very simple thing, but it's amazing how many salespeople don't realize that what I say in selling is the number of minutes that you spend face-to-face with prospects. I call it the minutes theory of success in selling, is the number of minutes you spend face-to-face. So what you do is you organize every part of your life from dawn till dusk so that you're spending the maximum number of minutes in front of people. I say if you are earning all you're earning today with the number of minutes you're spending in front of prospective customers today, if you double the minutes, you'll double your income just based on the law of probabilities. Not luck at all, just law of probabilities. Then the next thing I say is now, what one skill, if you could be absolutely excellent at it, would help you the most to achieve your most important goal? But one skill. So that you set down the goal and you make a plan to achieve it, and then you determine the one skill, and don't try to develop 50 skills. You determine the one skill, and then you make a plan to achieve that. So you have a goal to achieve your goal and a goal to achieve the skill that will help you to achieve the goal. And if you do those two things in tandem and work on them each day, your life just explodes.
Taking into account, Brian was talking about the number and probability, just a different perspective, but I think very much in alignment. What I've done and what I teach really is to get people to understand that there are specific fixed numbers in mind. As an example, 535,600 minutes is the number of minutes in a calendar year. As a salesperson, I think even somebody who's a secretary, it doesn't really matter what your job profession is that if you do the math and you take your last year's income and divide it into 535,600, that will tell you what the value of your time is worth to the minute. The reason why that's important is because people waste so much time. And the fact is, if you want to make $1 million a year, what that means is your time is worth $1.92 per minute. That's just what it comes down to. And somebody making $25,000 per year, their time is worth 9 cents per minute. That's just the way the math works. And if you want to increase the value, or should we say, if you want to earn more money, bottom line, it's all value creation, but you must focus on increasing the value of every minute of your time. And by breaking it down to that micro component, that gets you to start paying attention to what are the key critical things. Now, with that being said, I actually learned this from Brian, maybe not necessarily this language, but to me, I live and die by what I call a law of three. And a law of three basically tells me is that there's only three things I need to do in order to grow my business. Everything else gets outsourced. I have staff who takes care of it. But my job is to write or create content. Number two, my job is to oversee, to market content. And number three, it is to deliver content, to be on stage on different type of presentations such as this. Anything else besides of that is not part of the things that I need to focus on. And I think that's probably true of both John and Brian as well, that you have a very short list of things that you've said yes to.
You're absolutely right. I call it the law of three. There's only three things you do that contribute 90% of all the value you create. And your job is to determine what those three things are. And then here's my rule, which you'll love my little rule. My rule says do fewer things, but do more important things, and do them more of the time and get better at them. Focus, focus, focus.
Mm-hmm. Especially on your strengths, especially on your passion, and especially on your purpose. Because you can focus on something, but if you're not great at it, you're not going to excel. But if it's something where you have skill, it's something where you have a purpose and a passion, that you were made for this, that you were called for this, and that you were meant to do this, then when you focus on it, that's what Napoleon Hill was talking about, right? That's where we really see the multiplying effect take fold and real success happens.
Ultimately, going back to your question at the very beginning, Phil, in terms of procrastination and what are some of the distracting points, I think a good way to look at this it goes back to even to Brian's list, but you take out a piece of paper and you basically have two sides to it, a yes and a no. And the fact is you need two lists. You need a yes list and a no list. The yes list, as we've already determined and reinforced a few times, should only consist of three things, no more than that. The no list should be very long. The unfortunate thing about life is what most people do is they have that whole list reverse engineered. Everything is on the yes list. They say yes to everybody, everything, every opportunity, and they're completely diffused, distracted, and get very little accomplished during the course of their lifetime. But you've got to be disciplined. And I think focus and discipline go hand in hand.
That was the key to Apple's success when you look at Apple. they had to say no to a lot of products to say yes to the iPhone, yes to the iPod. So they said, we're going to focus on just these products and making them great. And it was that focus that made Apple so successful.
Excellent. And what's interesting also on this whole lesson is Napoleon Hill refers to the other lessons as reinforcers to controlled attention, such as self-discipline, mastermind, positive mental attitude, going the extra mile. Which of the other lessons really stand out for you in terms of a reinforcement to this principle?
Well, I like his law of harmonious attraction, which was supposed to be a big secret. But the fact is that when you are concentrated on a single goal and you combine that concentration with positive energy, so you're happy, excited, enthusiastic, determined, highly energized, you do set up a force field of energy that starts to attract into your life people and circumstances to help you to achieve it. So that's an extraordinarily powerful concept. The greater focus and intensity you have on a single goal, the more you start to attract all the resources you need to achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me it was the positive mental attitude, because that's honestly my life's work, and it's what I know that I'm called to do, is to share positive energy, positivity with people and organizations and help them understand the power of optimism, the power of positivity in their lives. So seeing how when you focus, but then when you have that possession of your mind and you have that positive attitude, it allows you to create the success that you want. I often talk about the two dogs inside of us, and we all have a positive and negative dog, and whichever one we feed is what grows. So we must feed that positive dog on a daily basis. And I was talking to this guy who was in his 50s, and he completed 2 triathlons back to back. And I said, how did you do it? I mean, that's almost unheard of. He said, it was simple, really. I have learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself. Because if I listen to myself, I hear all the negative. I hear all the reasons why I can't do it. But if I talk to myself, I can feed myself with the encouragement to get it done. And so controlled attention plus a positive mental attitude, to me, is all about feeding that positive on a daily basis to overcome all the adversity, all the negativity, all the challenges that every one of us will have to overcome to define ourselves and ultimately our organization's success.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, without a doubt. I agree on both of them, actually. It was quite a good answer. For me, Phil, actually has a lot to do with self-discipline, for the simple reason that throughout our days, there's going to be temptations, there's going to be opportunities for us to lose focus, a whole host of different stuff, whether it's the phone ringing, an email, or some type of so-called emergency comes up. But I think everything is going to be a contestant for time, for attention, for focus. And unless you really stay and discipline yourself and stay true to that, it's going to be very easy for you to get moved off course. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, like anything else, they give in to temptation pretty quickly.
You know, Gary, this is so important. Thomas Moore wrote a book a few years ago, but he had one recommendation which echoes in my brain, and it was leave things off. Leave things off, because we are so distracted. Leave off the phone, leave off the computer, take everything off so that you can concentrate single-mindedly.
Drew, I just took my daughter's phone away. She's 14 years old, and her grades were not as good as they needed to be. And so she's 14. I took her iPhone away, and she was so distracted that she was living in that world and not focusing on what matters most. So ever since I took the phone away, guess who's getting A's now? Guess who's studying more? Guess who's doing their homework? My daughter has huge, huge impact.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Excellent. And I just love really what you said also. All of you are just adding so many jewels of insight. But you also skipped on, John, to what Hill talks about, autosuggestion, which is really affirming. Instead of listening to yourself, you're really affirming your goal and your definite chief aim. What has been your experiences with a mastermind group in terms of maintaining that controlled attention or focus?
I would say Brian is a real expert in that, right, Brian, on the mastermind side of things?
Yes, I found that there's a direct relationship between the positive people you associate with on a regular basis and your success in life. And the more you can associate, even one-on-one. You know, the most powerful mastermind is a husband and wife.
Yes.
Who are together. And then business associates. And then people outside of your business. But the more you can just sit with people and listen and talk, the more ideas you get and the faster you move towards your goals.
Right. And the accountability, I would think, that really reinforces the focus, doesn't it?
That's a great point.
I started teaching a program called the 2-Day MBA. And in that, I use the 80-20 principle. 20% I explain the principles, 80% they work, write down answers to questions I've explained, and then talk to each other. Then they turn and they share their answers, and each person is trained to be a consultant to each other person. Why did you choose that as an answer? How would you implement that? How would you measure it? What is your schedule? And so on. And after 2 days, my students, sometimes 300, 400, 500 at a time, they come out and they are just absolutely wired. Their eyes are shining. They've got idea after idea after idea. And I've had countless people come back and say their business was struggling. They came to this process. They masterminded with these people for 2 solid days, people they'd never met before, and they went out and turned their business around in 30 days, doubled the size of their sales. They were just so shocked at how powerful this mastermind process is.
Yeah, and when I think of mastermind, this is John Gordon, I think of teams. I work with a lot of sports teams. So I work with the Atlanta Falcons this year. I've worked with the USA Olympic basketball team. They all read the energy bus before the Olympics this year. And working with all these different college and professional sports teams, you see how the mindset of a team, and a team that really is thinking the right way and having the relationships and the team building that they have, that you really do win in the locker room first, and then you win on the field. And I really believe the same thing with organizations. You win when you have a team that really comes together. And a lot of that is the mindset, a lot of that is the belief, and a lot of that is the relationships that they create. So to me, the ultimate mastermind is, like Ryan said, is definitely the family and the marriage. And then I love seeing sports play out because you can see within a 16-week season or over the course of a few months whether that team is on the same page.
Yes.
It's funny, I have joined and participated in a number of different masterminds, and I have a variety of different experiences. What I've come to take away from it is, ultimately, what makes a good mastermind work, you need harmony in the relationships, but I think you need good, solid, provocative questions. And what I have a tendency of doing at this stage in my life is I'm very selfish when it comes to conversations. For the most part, I'm usually the quietest person in the room, but when I get to somebody one-on-one, or if I just have 2, maybe 3 people around me, I will ask very provocative questions focused on some of the goals that I have or some of the problems that I'm dealing with, and look for some advice. And I just find that really taking the time to craft a good question and honestly being open to the feedback that people give you, you can create a mastermind in a coffee shop with a stranger. I do it on an airplane all the time with people sitting next to me. So I think sometimes we have a tendency to think that it needs to be a well-organized or constructed type of a meeting. And my advice would be for people to kind of open up their definition of how they define a mastermind. Just wanted to share.
Oh, that's beautiful, because I'm learning right now from Gary, and I'm learning from Brian, and so I even consider this a mastermind right now, just being with these great gentlemen.
I read a line from Earl Nightingale, who was greatly influenced by a copy of Think and Grow Rich at the beginning of his career. And what he said was something I never forgot. He said, all great accomplishments are preceded by an extended period of focus and concentration. And that's always been a guiding point for me. I'm writing 8 books this year, all under contract, and I write 4 books a year. But people say, how can you write so many books? And the answer is one of the things we've been talking about. First of all, I set it as a goal. I make an objective for the book. I have a process of doing it. But then I shut out all distractions and just concentrate single-mindedly. It's almost like a laser beam on writing a book. And it's amazing how much you can get through if you have no distractions. And it's amazing how little you can get done if the distractions are nonstop.
And so maybe we can talk about how this controlled attention has influenced each of our works in terms of our own personal focus. For me, learning to focus on what my core purpose was and to really identify, what am I really here for? What is my definitive purpose? That took a lot of questions. I mean, it takes time to actually come up with that. You have to reflect on it. You have to think about it. For me, I pray on it. I mean, you really have to think about these things. You can't just go forward with focusing without focusing on the right things. You don't want to climb the wrong ladder, right? So it's important to really think about what you're here to really focus on. And I had to come up with that because I wanted to write many books, but I knew I had to focus on one at a time to write what I was meant to write. And I believe that's been the key to my success. And also, I don't allow a lot of distractions to come in. Like Gary, I say my purpose is to write, it's to speak, and it's to really share this message of how positive people, positive leaders, and positive organizations make a difference. And I know that is my focus, and that is all I do. When I get all distractions coming at my way, I turn a lot of things down because I have to focus on what matters most. And I believe that all comes from Napoleon Hill's teaching.
I absolutely agree. And here's another good way of looking at this. I think many of us have been taught, sometimes incorrectly, what certain words truly mean. As an example, empowerment. We have a tendency of thinking that empowerment is what we can do for people, but I have fundamentally found that empowerment is what you take away. Because when you take away things, you automatically engender focus. As an example, in an organization, the key thing that a manager or a parent or anybody really can do is sit back and say to themselves is, what are all the things that we can take away from our team, from my associates, my employees, whatever it is, that would make them more profitable, more productive, more efficient, whatever word you happen to be looking for. And the fact is, inside organizations, there's meetings that have redundancy. There's check policies that require 3 different signatures that slow things up. There's a whole host of things that essentially what they do is they slow things and bog things down. And if you remove some of these inconsistencies, unproductive activities, you would automatically become focused. And I think a lot of times what people do is they try to think about what are the things I can get more of. But the fact is, you're better off focusing on the things that you can get less of, because that automatically limits your choices, tightens your focus, basically you get a heck of a lot more done.
One of the powerful tools I've discovered on focus has been a gentleman who became a friend of mine, Dan Britton, and his good friend Jimmy Page. For years, they've been coming up with their one word that will be the focus for their life that year, that one word that becomes a driving force. And every year they pick their one word. So I did this 3 years ago, and my word was purpose. And then the following year, it was positive. And then this year, it's serve. And then my wife came up with her words, and I've had my kids do it. And now I've been sharing this with so many different organizations. And it's so powerful to come up with your word for the year that you can focus on that word. We actually did a book called One Word That Will Change Your Life. And it gets people to really focus on something for that year. Because resolutions we forget, and too many people forget their goals. But when you can focus on one word that's a driving force, it really keeps you on the right track.
What you're talking about really is what I would call a theme-based initiative. It's kind of like if you go to Vegas and you walk into Caesars, it's a Romanesque theme. In the same way you go over to Paris, it's a Paris theme. A theme a day or a theme of the week or whatever the case might be, but this is the month of discipline. And then you sit back and say to yourself, how can I be more disciplined with my money? How can I be more disciplined with my time? How can I be more disciplined with the use of the internet? And you take that one word, that one virtue, if you will, and you spread it across everything. And that becomes your focal point that month or week. But John, I think it's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And going through the 17 lessons would be a great way to do it, which many of the achievers have done.
But if you go back and even look at Ben Franklin, he had his 13 virtues. And he spun them 4 times throughout the year, and he focused it on one of those virtues consistently again and again and again. You're talking about 17, and the way Napoleon Hill has it set up, without a doubt, somebody could take that approach.
And whatever one focus on expands, doesn't it? If you focus on, for instance, buying a particular car, all of a sudden you'll start seeing them all over the road, for instance. Isn't that the case, Brian?
Yes. It has to do with what I call the superconscious mind. And the superconscious mind is sometimes called universal intelligence, cosmic habit force in Napoleon Hill's work. But basically it is a massive mind that you can tap into when you have absolutely clear goals and you're absolutely determined to achieve those goals. And the more you think about them and the more you visualize them, the more you imagine them, the more you affirm them through auto-suggestion to yourself, the more you activate this great mind to bring you incredible ideas and insights, and also it's the seat of attraction to attract into your life people and circumstances that can help you. So one of the things that I do every day, and which I've been teaching for years, is write down your 10 goals, and then every day rewrite your 10 goals. Take a spiral notebook, I have mine right in front of me here, and rewrite your 10 most important goals anew each day, each morning, without looking at what you wrote the day before. Start with a new page and write down your goals. And what will happen over time is your definitions of your goals will change subtly. The order that you write them down in will change. New goals will be added. Old goals will either fall off or be accomplished. But it's the most incredible exercise. And I used to tell my students, if you will come to me for one full day every 3 months for a year, that's 4 full days, I will show you how to double your income and double your time off. And I teach them this exercise. And many of them said just writing down their goals every day enabled them to double their income and double their time off within a month. Because suddenly they developed absolute clarity and were able to focus single-mindedly on what was most important to them in each part of their life.
That is so true. Champions expect to win. You win in the mind first, and then you win out in the world. So everything really does start with your mind. And so you have to have this belief, you have to have this expectation, and you have to have some goals of what you want to achieve. And so most people, if they're just starting their day without goals or expectations or intention, they're going to wander through life. But I think it's the act of writing your goals down, as Brian said, that is so powerful. And what we do focus on starts to show up more in our lives. And so if we believe our best days are behind us, they are. If we believe our best days are ahead of us, they are. What we believe matters. And I love what Steve Jobs, they talked about his reality distortion field. He was able to distort people's reality. So time and time again, people would say, oh, you can't do this. It's not going to be possible to create this software in this amount of time. We can't create this glass for the iPad. And time again, he would convince them that they can do it. He changed their reality. And so it shows the power of the mind that we can literally change our mind to change our reality to then change the results.
And a good example of that was also Ford when he instructed his engineers to create the V8 engine, right? Persistence played a big part in remaining.
Persistence, and think you can and think you can't. Either way, you are correct. He was famous for saying that.
We talked about writing them down. How powerful is it and how important is it to read them out, let's say in the morning and throughout the day and the evening? What kind of impact does that have, and carrying it with you throughout the day? What's been your experience with that?
The image I have is, imagine an army surrounding a city that's on a hill, and it's attacking it with artillery, and it bombards it from all sides. So I say the same thing is to bombard your mind with your goal from all sides. And there's several different ways. When you write a goal down, it's called a psychoneuromotor activity. It activates your visual sense because you see it. It activates your auditory sense because you're speaking the goal as you're writing it. It's called sub-vocalizing. And it activates your kinesthetic sense in that you physically are in motion when you're writing. When you activate all three, the goal that you write down is immediately transferred to your hard drive, your subconscious mind, where it begins to work 24 hours a day. So really there's nothing more powerful than a written goal. And then writing and rewriting the goal drives it deeper and deeper into your mind and activates more and more of your mental powers. Then there's a whole bunch of tricks that you can use. We teach, one is to take 3x5 index cards and write down your goal in the present tense as though it were already achieved, and then reread this card 2 or 3 times a day. Take it out and just look at the card, and your mind photographs the card, and it's transferred to your subconscious mind. So just rereading those goals. And I used to carry index cards with me with 10 to 15 goals and do it over and over again. And virtually every one of those goals was eventually realized. And another thing that you can do is visualize the goal. Visualize yourself doing what you would do to achieve the goal, or visualize what you would be doing after you've achieved the goal. Some people just visualize a big check. One of the great exercises you can do is make out a check to yourself for the amount of money that you want to earn that year, so that you can see the check made out to yourself for that amount. And then, as a friend of mine says, then think all year long how you're going to make payroll.
Yep. I love that. The new research from Harvard shows that the thoughts we think before we go to bed, so it's not just about the morning, but at night, the thoughts we think before we go to bed, we replay in our mind, our subconscious mind, throughout the night 18 times, whereas just random things throughout the day, we might replay once or twice or 3 times. And so it's those thoughts we think before the bed that are so important to fill our minds with the things that we want, that we will hope to accomplish, that we want to believe. And so many people end the day thinking about the negative, not the positive. They think about all the things that went wrong. So I try to encourage people to focus on their success of the days, the one thing that went right, the one great accomplishment, the one thing they're proud of. And the more you do that, you'll wake up ready to take on the day again with more accomplishments.
It's true.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it really is. I go back and let's refer back to the idea of probability and, to a certain extent, the principle of certainty. I like the metaphor of a cookbook. If you look at a cookbook, it literally is. It's a recipe. But in a good quality cookbook, they always give you the picture of the ideal outcome in advance. And for me, as you sit back, I think each one of us could probably attest to this. If you speak to an Academy Award-winning actor, if you speak to an athlete who's won the Olympics or anything along this way, they have visualized themselves as a young boy or young girl wearing that gold medal, or giving that acceptance talk. They could visualize who that is or whatever the case might be. But I'm a big believer in really kind of a three-step process. Number one, you want to be able to get the picture of that outcome. Find what perfection looks like for you, whatever it is you're moving towards. Write the date underneath it or write on the picture so you've got it across it. And I just go through a process. It's kind of an old Animal House story, but assume the position. You want to assume the mental position that this goal is inevitable. And I really do, is that before you even take the first step, you are absolutely, positively guaranteed, certain, without a doubt, that this will be achieved on this date. And mentally, you've got to get that construct basic centered into your mind before you start taking some serious action.
Could I add something to that? When it comes to goals, though, one thing I believe is important is also surrendering the outcome. Because one thing I have found is if we hold on too tight, I believe we create our vision, we create our goals, but we also have to also surrender the outcome. So we work hard to achieve them, but I think if we can hold on too tight, we sometimes can prevent them from happening, and some people can do this too often.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the questions that I've taught over and over again, I call it the magic wand, and I always carry a large silver pen in my pocket, and I say, imagine you had a magic wand, and I take it out, and I say, you could wave it, and you could accomplish any goal in your life. Which one goal would you want to achieve? And so I asked this question, what one great goal would you dare to dream if you knew you could not fail? If you're absolutely guaranteed success in any one goal that you could think of and write down, which one goal would you pick for yourself? And this deals with the problem of fears of failure, fears of rejection, loss of money, loss of time. Imagine you were guaranteed of it. What would you do differently? How would you behave if you absolutely knew this goal was achievable as long as you persisted? And that totally transforms your thinking.
And there goes positive mental attitude and enthusiasm. What other senses can one awaken in order to reinforce the element of concentration? We talked about writing it down, auto-suggestion. What about vision boards? Have you used that as means in order to reinforce?
I was just going to say that, keeping your vision alive in whatever method that works for you, but the vision is so important. Marathon runners, most people quit the marathon not in the first mile and not in the last mile. It should be the last mile because that's when they should be the most tired, but they don't give up because they can see it. It shows the power of vision. Most people give up in the 20th mile. It's where they're physically exhausted, they're tired and drained, and then mentally, at that moment, they don't see it, they lose their vision. So I often say if you keep your vision alive, it will keep you alive. And so keeping that vision alive front and center is so important. Like the one-word exercise I was telling you earlier, we encourage people to make a painting of their word. Working with UCF basketball, they actually took all their words and they put it on a ball. And now they take that ball with them to every game. So all the players see their words. Hendrick Auto, who I worked with, Jimmy Johnson's racing team and those guys, they have now a car in their headquarters with all of the words of all the employees on the car to remind them to focus on their vision each day they're coming to work. So having a vision and then having a tool is key, and I'm sure Gary and Brian have certain techniques that work for that.
Oh, without a doubt. I was going to add to the idea in terms of what other senses, I think the question was, Phil. And for me, I've always thought that the single best thing that you need or can get for yourself is evidence. And where is evidence? Evidence is somebody who's already achieved that goal. So if you want to write a best-selling book, if you want to raise healthy, happy, self-confident kids, if you want to learn how to play the guitar, or whatever the case might be, you find somebody who's already an expert at that. Brian stated this to me many, many years ago. Don't be cheap when it comes to knowledge. Invest, because those people will save you decades of hard work and a lot of mistakes, which is very true. But here's the one thing you learn from an expert, if you have a conversation with them, is that they will speak with ease, with confidence, and with elegance. And I ultimately found that the solution to just about any problem that we're dealing with is usually simple and elegant, and somebody has figured it out. Go to the source. Go to somebody who's already climbed Mount Olympus. And by doing that, you're going to have a frame of reference, you're going to have some expert advice, but most importantly, you're going to have kind of like that wristband. People would say, what would Jesus do? But in this case, what would Brian do? What would John do? What would this guy do? Whoever gave you that advice right now as it relates towards that goal. So I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, and most people don't even think about taking advantage of it that way.
And that's the power of Think and Grow Rich. That's exactly what Napoleon Hill did, mandated by Andrew Carnegie, is he went to the most successful individuals living and found those common denominators, which he assembled into these 17 principles. So that's great. Anything you want to add to that, Brian?
Well, to go a little bit further, we've now decided on our major definite purpose. We've now decided how we're going to measure our major definite purpose. We've now decided, or at least resolved to decide, the one skill that can help us the most to achieve that. I love the wonderful line that says, to achieve a goal you've never achieved before, you must learn things you've never learned before. You must become a person you've never been before. And it's the idea from Einstein. It says you cannot solve a problem on the same level at which you meet it. You cannot achieve a bigger goal with the same person that you are today. And many people don't understand, as Gary was just saying, that you have to learn and grow and become a new person. You have to develop new skills. My friend Jim Rohn, when he was alive, had this wonderful line. He said, it's not becoming a millionaire that's important. It's the person you have to become a millionaire that is important. You have to develop willpower, tenacity, self-discipline, control, punctuality, time management skills, higher skills. You have to become a totally different person on the inside in order to achieve $1 million on the outside. And then the good news is that if you lose the money because of the stock market or something else, you can make it all back again because you're that kind of a person now by this time. So the next thing is, what is the most important result that you can get today that will help you to achieve your biggest goal? What's the most important result of all? And then focus on a single result with a single measure aimed at a single goal.
Powerful. Indeed. Powerful. Well, this has been tremendous. Well, I just want to thank everybody for being on this program, and what you've given us are just real jewels of insight that we can take with us and build on. As we close off this program, if there was one takeaway or one thing that perhaps we missed addressing in this audio program that you'd like our listeners to take with them, what would that be? And perhaps we can start with you, John.
Sure. Well, Covey's research shows that after a talk or a seminar or hearing something like this, you may have a lot of things you want to implement. But if you just focus on implementing one thing, just one thing, you'll have a 97% chance of success. If you try to do two things, it goes down to about 50%. Three things, now you're down to about 30%. So with controlled attention being our principal theme here, then it's really about zoom focusing. And so today, as you go to take action on the things we talked about, just pick one thing that you will do differently today that will help you be better than you were yesterday. And then tomorrow, focusing on being better tomorrow than you were today. If we just do that every day and with continuous improvement in mind, we'll become the people that we were meant to be. And I just want to say one final thing. Don't chase success. We often talk about it. Think and Grow Rich, as Brian said. It's not about being a millionaire. It's about the person you become along the way. So don't chase success. Decide to make a difference, and success will find you. Become the person you're meant to be, and success will find you. And Napoleon Hill's principles are all part of that.
Oh, what a rich and empowering insight. And John, for those that want to learn more about you and the service that you offer, where can they find you?
They can just go to johngordon.com, JON Gordon.com, and I'm just excited to be on this with these two great other individuals and teachers. Brian's been a big influence on my life, and so many people that I talk to know of Brian, and same thing with Gary. The influence that these gentlemen have been awesome, so it's been great. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for being on our program. And Gary, would you like to give us that takeaway that you'd like our listeners, and with that, just tell our listeners where they can find you?
You bet. I'd be happy to. As it relates towards, the whole idea of wrapping up controlling your attention and focus, in every industry, I'm just going to point this really towards business for just a moment. If you look at law, the people who are the most successful are the most focused. And they're the ones who basically have looked at every single discipline in law and said, you know what, we're going to be famous for DWI, and that's the only thing they do. In the same way that a bankruptcy attorney does, an divorce attorney does, or anything like that, they have picked their spot. They're one area of discipline. They control their attention. They own and dominate because it's market niche. The same thing is true when it comes to TV, from Comedy Channel, Weather Channel, Nickelodeon, whatever the case might be. In the same way, even like somebody who's going to be a surgeon, there's people who are making a fortune who have just focused in on LASIK surgery. Your ability to control your attention is not just a discipline, it is a business model. It is truly a key to success. And we've got to remember the whole idea that follow one course until successful. Pick your spot. and do it well and become an expert at that. And I just can't help but think that anybody who sustains that level of control focus over a period of time will be very happy with the outcome that they're able to achieve. But thank you very much for this opportunity to be here. And both, John, it was a pleasure to meet you, and John, Brian, as always, man, it's good to hear your voice.
Oh, that's great, Gary. And you have also the 100-day challenge, right? Can you tell us where we can find more about what you offer?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. 100daychallenge.com. It's a very aggressive online goal-setting program. Think of kind of like how do they build a house on Extreme Home Makeover in 7 days. In this case, kind of one of the value propositions is how do you turn your annual income in a very short period of time? How do you achieve that, let's just say, in 90 or 100 days? It compresses time by focusing your attention, quite simply.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your insights, Gary. And Brian, why don't you take us home, and in doing so, let us know where we can find out more about you and your upcoming events.
Well, I'd like to end with one key idea which has changed my life in the last few years. It is that successful people are absolutely excellent at what they do. They are in the top 10% of their field. Successful companies are excellent. Successful products and services in the market are rated as being excellent. And so one of your great goals in life has to be to become absolutely excellent at what you do. And it may take 5 or 7 or 10 years for you to get into the top 10% in your field. If you want to be a big success and happy and fulfilled and make a great contribution to your life and your world, you must set it as a goal to get into the top 10% in your chosen field, which means that you must do something that you love to do, and you must want to get better and better at it all your life. And if you will do that, everything will change for you. If your goal is to become absolutely excellent at doing something that serves others, you're going to have a wonderful life. With regard to me, anybody who wants information, free newsletters, free audio programs, please come to briantracy.com and wander around my store and pick whatever you like.
Oh, well, that is fantastic. Just the concluding remarks along with just the substance and offer throughout the program was just a real value and treat for all our listeners. So thank you all for being on this program of Controlled Attention. God bless you. And listeners, tune in to the next lesson on teamwork with Danny Cox, Bob Danzing, and Jim Tunney.